So this is Justin. I'm going to try and talk a little bit about a video that I just saw on YouTube. This is my response to COVID Amnesty, which is a video by someone named Kate Wand. Now, I'll be clear, I have never heard of Kate Wand before today. The YouTube algorithm pointed me to her video, which I think is a pretty good video. I can definitely pick up on what her personal point of view is from this video. I think there's no doubt about it. I think most likely if I were to dig into her channel, I would probably see a whole bunch of very partisan videos that maybe I may or may not care for too much. I don't know. I don't want to say anything else about her. Like I say, I know nothing else about her other than this one video that I've watched. I do think it's a very interesting video, though. It touches on some good points about forgiveness, which I think is one of the most important elements of how to live a good life, is understanding and practicing forgiveness. It's one of the more difficult elements of life. And so I think it's, a really good thing for people to be considering and thinking about how to do. So in her video, she presents two characters who approach the pandemic in two different ways and kind of presents us with a fictional conversation of them sort of trying to reconcile. I think if you watch the video, you'll see that really one of them is trying to reconcile but doesn't know what that means. And the other one basically has no interest in reconciling. So, I'll tell you, in my own experience, I kind of went through both of those character types during the pandemic. Perhaps not to the same extreme, but like it's had an impact on my life for sure. And like I say, it's pretty easy to tell. She identifies with the character that I'm going to call the non-masker. For lack of a better term, I'll call her two characters, the masker and the non-masker. And so the masker clearly went forward through the pandemic with taking all of the precautions that were ever recommended to the extreme. So wearing masks in all situations, practicing social distancing in all cases, et cetera, et cetera. And then the non-masker, of course, did not. And so basically the non-masker claims that, she knew all along that these precautions would be ineffective and weren't worth doing, and actually had bad effects on people. And the masker claims, well, we just didn't know that that was the case. So that's point number one that I want to get to in my response to this video. Amongst my own friends, the number of people who were once maskers but now say, well, we didn't know, but it turns out that that doesn't actually work very well, is extremely low. I'm not sure if I can think of anybody for whom that's actually the case. So right there, her caricature of the non-masker is not a realistic person, in my opinion. Most of the people I know who were extreme maskers are still extreme maskers, right? They will try to argue that we should still be wearing masks out in public and in school, and that we should still be practicing social distancing and trying to stay home as much as possible. And I absolutely know people who are doing that. And I think most of them recognize that that's just not the way that we're going to go as a society at this point. But in their mind, that's to all of our detriments. And if they could get us back to practicing things the way that we were in, say, April of 2020, and perhaps even more strict than that, then they would absolutely go with it. And they think that that's the best way to go. So this idea of people who went to that extreme back then, but now are saying, well, it was all a mistake, let's move on, which is what this person is doing. I think that's a very, very rare sort of a person. Now, yeah, her masker starts with an expression of happiness that COVID is over. Now, of course, we know it's actually not over. COVID is still around. I think we all recognize that it's going to be around forever. I think it was a massive misconception by anybody who believed that it was eventually just going to go away. I know from my own experience during that time, the thought was basically like, hey, we just kind of need to get through this until we have our vaccines, and then it's on to normal life, where this is just kind of a part of how things go. Yeah, the masker readily concedes that we now know that masks don't do anything and that we went too far in our COVID precautions. Now, like I say, I don't think that very many people actually think that. I think most people who went through with these precautions are still trying to do so. So, for many people, though, I don't think it was quite as simple as falling into one of these two categories. I think this was kind of the case for me, that really we always kind of knew that masks didn't do much. But I think the thought was that, well, they might do something, and something is better than nothing. And wearing a mask, it doesn't really hurt anything. So we might as well do it because at the time there was just nothing else we could do, right? And to be honest, I kind of still think that. I think, this idea that masks do nothing is just not quite borne out. Now, they don't do a ton. I think that's pretty clear, but I don't think it's quite clear that they do nothing, right? Nowadays, it's probably not worth it wearing them. And to be honest, I'm not wearing them unless I'm in a situation where I'm asked to for some reason, and I'll make it a point on that, right? If I need to meet with somebody and they ask me to wear a mask, I will do it just out of courtesy to them. I'm not going to turn it into a political statement or somehow that they're trampling on my rights by asking me to do that. No, I'll wear a mask for their sake. All right. I don't think it's really doing much, but you know what? They're asking me to, so I might as well be nice about it, and I'll do it. And I think that's where a lot of folks are. Once the vaccine came out, the masks kind of went away because hey, the vaccine is the better long term fix. I think for the most part, people kind of understand that just wearing a mask whenever you're out in public for the rest of eternity is just not going to be the way that things work, right? Now, the non-masker is claiming, I always knew that these responses were over the top, and of course, I think she's wrong about that. She's somewhat right, right? There's, you know, outdoor masks. I think we always pretty much knew that those were worthless, and I didn't wear masks outdoors. I might have pulled them up in front of my nose sometimes when passing by other people, just to be, again, kind of nice to them. I don't think there was ever much of a thought that it was really doing anything, but hey, it doesn't really hurt anything, so might as well do that. Now, there were some crazy, crazy things that happened during the pandemic. And I think she's kind of, Kate Wand is trying to get at some of that, right? Things like canceling surgeries and cancer treatments, and closing down everything. Like, that was always a very bad idea. And I do indeed think that it's really bad that that happened. And we should be talking about why did that happen and how can we avoid that sort of a situation again in the future, right? I mean, canceling surgeries, it's, you're worried that if you've got a team of 10 people in the operating room and, if COVID were to happen to spread there, you'd think, okay, so typically 0.5% of people die. So out of every 20 such surgeries, maybe one person would get COVID in a serious way. Maybe they would help spread it or whatever. But, then you've got somebody who is supposed to be getting a treatment for a serious illness that they're not getting. So yeah, I agree. I think canceling surgeries and cancer treatments and whatnot was really bad, and it should not have happened. Locking people in their rooms in group homes and whatnot for a very extended period of time, it was a very bad thing. That was absolutely cruel. It should not have been done. I think the people doing it thought they were doing the right thing. I think they were saying, yes, this is very hard, but we have to do what we have to do. It may have gone on a little bit longer than it should have, but I don't think that for the most part people were doing it maliciously. At one point late in the video, she gets into the idea that maybe there should be some criminal charges. To be honest, I don't see it. I don't know what crimes were committed. I really don't. But yes, locking people in their rooms, that was bad. And then schools. Now, my daughter started kindergarten during the pandemic in September of 2020. All right, so when she started school, instead of doing all day kindergarten, they did half day kindergarten so that they could make the classes half the size. And then on top of that, they had a school from home Zoom type of session on Wednesdays. I don't understand why they did that. How is it possible that it's okay to go to school Monday, Tuesday, and then Thursday, Friday, but not on Wednesday? Unless maybe the idea was that we're going to deep clean the classrooms, because there was this idea that, we got to keep things clean because things might spread through surfaces. I think we were very slow to drop that idea. I think it was very clear very quickly that that wasn't the case. So, I do think that was a mistake. But the worst part of it all, from my perspective, was that Wednesday Zoom call that they did was half an hour, and that somehow counted as a day of school. I complained straight to the school superintendent when I saw that schedule. I said, this is not a day of school. I basically got ignored, and my school district went on to debate about the appropriateness of our school logo for most of the rest of the year. I was very frustrated with that, So I think that absolutely, there were definitely some over the top reactions to the pandemic. Now, were people going through those reactions maliciously, though, meh, I'm not so sure that that's the case. All right. The ineffectiveness of the vaccine, I don't think she quite gets that right either, although the vaccines are more complicated too. So I got the vaccine as soon as I was eligible, and I got the booster, and I got the second booster. I'm resisting getting the third booster at this point. So, why did I do that? Well, I do think that the vaccine seems to have been effective against the Delta and earlier variants, which were the more serious variants. And I think it really did kind of help to bring a stop to the pandemic from the evidence that I've seen. So this idea that the vaccine just did nothing is wrong. However, there's also no doubt that these vaccines can have serious side effects. Now, I got through it okay. I didn't have much of a response to the vaccines, but there are a lot of people that found themselves completely out of commission for a day or two following each of their shots. And indeed, there are still people I know who are still going and getting the shots, even though that's what happens to them. I mean, that's a fairly serious side effect. And, is it worth doing? I don't know. I mean, at this point, like I say, the pandemic is hospitalizing a small fraction of the people who get this virus. So, I do think that the seriousness of this vaccine is not really communicated very well to the people who are getting it, right? I don't recall having been given an informed consent prior to getting this vaccine. But maybe that's something that we should have been doing, right? But I guess getting really into the meat of the video here, I'd like to talk about the concept of forgiveness, right? Her non-masker character runs through all of the bad things that are happening and basically says, look, if we're going to have forgiveness, you guys need to have an admission of what you've done wrong so that we can move on and have accountability. This is an idea about forgiveness that's very much out there in the world right now, and I think it's wrong. Right? I think that forgiveness is something that we do. It's not, in this case, it wouldn't be that the masker forgives the non-masker. Sorry, the other way around, that the non-masker forgives the masker for the sake of, making them feel better about themselves, right? Forgiveness is for the person who's doing the forgiving. This is what people don't seem to understand about it. It doesn't matter if the other party apologizes. It doesn't even matter whether they actually did anything that is truly wrong. It's very possible to be in a situation in which you should be forgiving somebody who has never done anything wrong. Right? I once had somebody tell me that it was important that I forgive God. That blew my mind. It was one of the more important things that I ever heard, because from my perspective, God's supposed to be perfect. How could he ever need to be forgiven? Well, the answer is he doesn't need to be forgiven. I need to forgive, right? And I'm kind of thinking that this video is not going to get posted right now. I'm kind of rambling on. I may need to re-bring my thoughts back together at some point. But this, I think, is the main point of forgiveness that people are not understanding, is that forgiveness is for the sake of the person doing the forgiving. If you want a good description of how forgiveness should work, I recommend the book Desmond and the Really Mean Word by Desmond Tutu. I think he's got it pretty much right on. And then, of course, at the end, we have the masker decides to declare the friendship toxic and decide that we can't talk to each other anymore, which, of course, is a very common thing that you see right now, and it's really wrong too. So I guess in the end, I do kind of agree with the non-masker a little bit more on most of it. Not necessarily about the technical aspects of the pandemic, but about her attitude right now. But in the end, her refusal to forgive, I think, is wrong. Her insistence on an admission of guilt is wrong. Right? I think we are in a position as a society where we can move forward, and we should move forward. And, we shouldn't just be looking to hold these sorts of things over our heads. I do think it's important that we review what's happened, especially so that we can maybe do a little bit better next time. I think, though, that the problem with our pandemic response was the same as our problem with society overall, which is that everybody is about defending their team. It became very quick that what you thought was the right thing to do in response to the pandemic had everything to do with what your political views were. That became very clear to me right away, and that's really bad. And until we stop being that way, where we defend our political team over all else, I don't see how we're going to, be able to properly review what happened or move on. So anyways, like I say, I don't know if I'm going to post this, but yeah, I may just throw it up there. It's not like I have a professional YouTube channel or anything. It's always just me rambling. Most likely no one will ever see it anyways. I think this is a very important topic. I may try to see if I can figure out ways to talk a little bit more about it. But I guess the key thing that I want to say is that forgiveness is for the benefit of the forgiver, not the forgivee. Right? The forgivee, generally, it doesn't do anything for them. Right? If I do something wrong and somebody forgives me, that doesn't really do much of anything for me except maybe to help me to forgive myself. Other than that, if someone forgives me, it's for their own benefit. And that, I think, is the way that we need to be looking to view forgiveness. All right. Well, anyways, I look forward to your comments, and I hope everybody has a great day. And please, by all means, feel free to comment, respond. Like I say, hopefully maybe sometime I will talk more about this. I feel like I've got some good thoughts, but the process of actually organizing my thoughts and turning them into something coherent for others to see is something I have to learn a little bit better how to do. But anyways, have a good one.